I no longer provide reinforcement for certain responses when I'm shaping. Doesn't that mean I'm using extinction? In this video, you get to go down the rabbit hole that is Megan's brain and listen to my analysis of this question, because I've definitely heard it numerous times. In a previous video, I defined shaping and differential reinforcement and pointed out how extinction actually isn't part of that. But let's just go for a second with this idea that we need to remove or no longer provide reinforcement for certain responses when we're shaping. The first thing I want to say is I think there's a big difference between shaping and addressing challenging behavior. Ideally, people are incorporating shaping when they're addressing challenging behavior and building skills. But what I'm talking about is when people are often using shaping in a skill development standpoint, and when they're using extinction to address challenging behavior, they're trying to get rid of a response. So to me, those are two entirely different things to begin with. And I think that distinction is important, because when we are looking at challenging behavior and we say, I'm going to remove this reinforcer that's, no longer going to happen after that response occurs, that is vastly different than having a goal with shaping that you've been providing reinforcement for this particular criteria, and now you're going to move it to a different criteria. In shaping, the adults are typically the ones determining the shaping steps and identifying what's being reinforced. And when a client moves from one approximation to the next approximation, that's not removing reinforcement for a response that's no longer wanted, that's unsafe. It's just changing your goal. When I do a shaping procedure, I'm usually very generous with reinforcement at the beginning. Like, anything that brings us closer to our goal is contacting reinforcement. How else am I going to maintain motivation and momentum and build this skill? And then as the learner has more and more experience with the expectations, then I'm less generous with the reinforcement. Getting back to that idea of differential reinforcement that I talked about in the previous video. So if I don't reinforce a response, as I've progressed through a shaping procedure, to me, that's because I have different goals and the criteria is different, just like a different schedule of reinforcement. Even when you're working on skills with your learner and maybe they start out on a fixed ratio of 1 where they get a reinforcement for every response they give you. And then they go to a variable ratio of 3 where it's on average 3 responses. We wouldn't say there's extinction being involved there. We would just say we change the schedule of reinforcement. And people might argue with me about this, but we could even be transparent with someone when we're using shaping and let them know, hey, these are the shaping steps. These are the things that are going to contact the most reinforcement. And when we finish a step, we can check it off and work together and be like, cool, we accomplished that goal. Let's move to the next one. I'm not clear that there's any research on doing it that way, but there is research on goal setting and how effective that is. So just think about it from a shaping perspective. People who are really, really into shaping would not agree with that, because the idea is you're kind of catching things as they happen and reinforcing them, so you don't tell the person all of that information. But that's an entirely different discussion. I highly expect people to disagree with me on this, and it's not that I'm so against extinction that I can't admit that it's part of shaping, but it's just, for me, conceptually and how people are applying the procedure, I think we have to talk about it. Getting really nitty gritty and down in the weeds with it, maybe, but I think it's still important to understand that shaping and building skills through shaping, especially if you're focused more on that momentum piece, because with so many of my clients, I am just, anything that gets us closer to their goal is getting reinforced. It's about progress. And extinction is about removal. Extinction is about removing and trying to decrease things. And I just don't put the two together. Shaping is building, extinction is lessening. So I don't know. Please chime in, because like I said, I am sure people will disagree with me on this idea, but I don't think extinction has to be involved in shaping. And I think we need to be more clear about what we're actually doing.